And here we are. We are live. Thank you so much for joining us. We got a little late on today. With me, we are going to be talking about the presidential debate that occurred last night on June 27th. John Richardson and I, we've been hitting it off and we've been having growing some fan base and our keen legal analysis into various topics. And we thought we'd broaden our scope a little bit because we often look at things a little bit different perspective than most other people as we kind of know what the we were both familiar with the U.S. tax system, the true constitution of the American people, and so we kind of look at things from a different perspective. And so we are going to share our insights to this reaction presidential debate. Now, I haven't talked to John much at all about this. We kind of have our own place. So this is really sometimes in this spontaneous discussions we have of our own independent ideas, we come up with some really unique things. So thank you so much for joining us today as we discuss this. So this is what I'm going to say about last night's presidential debate, John. This is what I got. That was the greatest presidential debate of all time. So good. I'm going to say this. It could end all presidential debates of all time. It was so good. It was so wonderful. Now, many people would say that's a strange reaction, and maybe, but if you actually think of things in the right way, that's exactly the best thing we could ever hope for, because what we know about the U.S. federal government, it's the clearest enemy of the American people. And but the advantage it gets is it always has its sort of aura of respectability, as if it's really a thing. And I think with Joe Biden is just so wonderful. And I often do wonder if this is real, because how could you do this? Try to get this idea that he's actually a legitimate, that he's actually presidential material. I mean, look, I was alive in the 80s. John, do you remember in the 80s what Joe Biden's presidential run? Do you remember that one?
Was that the one where he was accused of plagiarizing some British politician's speech?
Yeah, well, no, not only accused of it, he did admit to it, and he did say, and he did admit to it. He plagiarized it, and so Joe Biden in his prime, Joe Biden in his prime is a bit suspect as it is, and so we're here to believe that he's improved with age, right? And I think my point is, like, look at this. It's clearly, whatever Joe Biden is, he's clearly not inside his mind. Right. We all got to just admit that he has issues beyond, somebody who wouldn't be a great president to begin with, had problems all over the place. And now is standing up there. And I mean, I honestly just think this is just, this was a cruel ploy to get rid of Joe Biden. I mean, it wasn't even I guess this is my question. How could Joe Biden do worse in a debate? How could an individual do worse than Joe Biden did in a debate? Now, and then this is my other thing. Joe Biden was so good in showing how all other presidential debates are so stupid. That's what I found. What I was listening to Joe Biden, this is what was going through my mind, John. I was thinking back to presidential debates where I thought my side won, but the fact is maybe they weren't that good. But the tribalism that we get will confuse people to think it's better than what it may be. And I'm thinking back to George Bush, who was, I was really believing that guy back then. And just, sort of that robotic, like, okay, we got to respond to this question. We got to respond to this question. It's so robotic and it's so unnuanced and it's so stupid. So Joe Biden just did a kind of caricature of every stupid presidential debate of all time, in my opinion. So that's kind of my base, John. It just shows the complete absurdity of our entire federal government and our entire media that presents this as a legitimate thing. And I'm thinking to myself, if you're not an American, what does this look like? All right, so that's why I'll let you talk a little bit, John. That was my initial reaction. So, what was your initial reaction to this? And you're going to be different because we haven't discussed this whatsoever. So, I'm looking forward to hear your perspective.
Well, I mean, I'll start with where you ended. Sort of the international perspective on this. Yeah, I think America is clearly a laughingstock.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons. The first would be, I mean, how in the world can a country claim to be a leader in the concept of democracy if 4 years later you have a rematch with two people of advanced age, as if there aren't better candidates. I mean, that's the first point. On that point, I would also, going back to the 80s, since you got my mind going back to the 80s now. So during that time period, right, this was height of Cold War. And you may recall the day that Brezhnev died, Soviet leader, General Secretary of the Communist Party.
Yeah.
I think it was Brezhnev died. And Brezhnev was succeeded in rapid succession by two or three people who didn't last very long, but they were considered to be very old, very out of touch, and just symbolic of how the party controlled the country. Okay, that individuals didn't matter at all, and these were people in their 60s who are way younger than Trump and Biden, right? So I mean, where the United States has come is that you've got a completely party-centric political process, right? I mean, I think particularly on the part of the Democrats, where it's all about the Democratic Party. As Tulsi Gabbard, for example, points out, upside down, sideways, and diagonally. And not about the voters at all. And what's happened is that the United States has evolved into this. It retains the title of a democracy when you have a two-party state, which is really only one party removed from a one-party state, where members of the party of sort of the inner circle decide who's going to be the presidential candidate, etc. And I think that there may be reasonable disagreement on this, but I think there's strong evidence that it was the DNC high command, so to speak, that effectively blocked the candidacy of Bernie Sanders, etc. I'm not saying I support him or not. That's not my
Right. No, right. But they did block it to hit it to Joe Biden. And right, not that I'm saying support, but that was definitely stolen from Bernie, and Bernie was fine with it.
And this is where we are. And then we have this, absolute. About a year ago, I watched Ford Carter debates in '76, and I would suggest that somebody go back and watch that or something else. I mean, there was actually a discussion of substance. There was actually rational discussion about stuff, and it was I would say a positive, collaborative dialogue in the form of a debate between two men who honestly had the best interest of the country at heart.
Well, I would say this. I would agree with you so far. And look, because if you do look back to presidential debates, they have substance in them. They do. And that was, we don't get to that. We don't get to substance. We get the repeat of tropes and gotchas. And so I think that's what was so glorious about this, is it shows how badly this entire system has devolved into basically just tribalism. And I'm sorry, Joe Biden did not win that debate. And I think 33% of people are convinced they did, he did. And come on, that's tribalism. That's totally tribalism.
Well, it's totally tribalism, Anthony. But here's another thought I have on this. Okay, another thing that's fascinating about this election, we have Trump Biden. I think this was somewhat true before, but I think it's absolutely true now. Is that neither candidate has the slightest amount of growth potential on their own, right? They're both well known. People know generally what they think of them. Although I do think that the court proceedings, the criminal proceedings against Trump may have made him slightly more popular. Okay.
Oh, it definitely did. No, I definitely have. I had a Biden supporter in my family. I won't tell you who it is, but no, he's no longer, and that was what did it. That's what did it.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question that that is the antithesis of what Merrick Garland would claim: nobody's above the law.
Yeah,
it's actually the antithesis because it demonstrates what's such a selective system of attempts to enforce the law.
Well, and I think what we saw in the debate is sort of the merger between the parties and media. They work hand in hand, and they work hand in hand to create a vastly inferior product, right? This political, because really, in a way, and if you think about what this really is, it's political entertainment, because much of this stuff doesn't matter. Because this is why it's pretty much political entertainment. Here's the number one problem with America, if you think about it. This is where we should just stop. Like, we should just stop everything we're doing, because this is the very truth of our representative process. The very truth of it. No one voting for any law is expected to read the law or even understand it. Okay. So, and then the other thing is, no lawmaker is required to make any laws. These things just show up all ready to go. They just show up all ready to go. And then people are told to say, okay, you're going to vote on it. And then as we know, the way that these acts are written, and it's impossible to understand it, because okay, this is amending this part, this is amending this part, this is amending this part. Even if you read it, what would you really understand? And then what you read, what you understand, well, hey, look, that's just the start of it. Now, the regulatory state is going to take that law and make it into something totally different. So what we have is we don't have lawmakers making laws. They come out of nowhere. They sign these laws, and then what they get in consideration, it's not their little salary. What they get in consideration is the ability to conduct insider trades on stocks, on the very industries they regulate. So, that we don't need to get Republican, Democrat. There's no representation whatsoever. There's none. They don't know what they're signing, and they don't care. And no one even asks. No one even cares. The media just like, what? So they don't read it. So what? Right? What's the big deal? So when we say we don't have any representation, and it's just, where does this come from? And this is just sort of because the political parties in the media are so inbred. They're so inbred. Well, this is what you get. It's a degenerate debate. We have the worst degenerate up there, and they propped them up there. And I got to say, Gabe, yeah, I agree with your comment here. I don't know. This is where I'm at. It was a humiliation ritual, and I gotta say, I think it's just their effort to get rid of him. What more would you do to make this to humiliate him, to discredit him? What more would you use? So that's where.
Well, Anthony, a couple points. One, a narrow one. I agree with you totally on the issue of how these laws are made. And, my opinion, I'm interested in your opinion on this, that there ought to be two things that should be required when these laws are made. One, they cannot be part of an omnibus bill. Okay, they have to be. But secondly, you have to include what the statute will look like after the amendment. Okay, so that these things are voted on, based on, we're going to take out this word here and add it there, but rather, here's what the damn thing looks like, because it's very difficult. I've got to
wait a second
to follow this stuff.
John, this is why I just love having you on the show. You bring up these things. Why do you present an act that way? What's the requirement that you present an act of, okay, we're going to present an act, a law, and we're only going to put down what we're going to change, right? Where does that come? Well, you have to change the law later, right? You're like, hey, look, if this act is passing the law, you're going to have to insert that and create one combined law.
Yeah.
So why don't you just present that thing, which it will be, as the thing you want passed, to say, hey, we want to replace this section with this, but they don't.
Well, I think all that needs to happen, Anthony, is that there ought to be a legal requirement to include what the law looks like after it's been amended. I think that that's all that's really required here. But I have spent, I'm not holding myself out as the brightest light in the stadium by any means, but goddamn, it can be very difficult to figure out what these proposed amendments to these laws mean. You look at something like FATCA, which is near and dear to the hearts of our listeners. That was probably in addition to the new Chapter 4 requirements. That was probably 50 amendments to other parts of the Internal
Right.
Revenue Code, right? When people say, well, let's get rid of FATCA, what the hell is that supposed to mean? I mean, the new law that was passed, the amendments to the old laws.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Get rid of. Right. Well, then now I'm thinking of the problem that, I guess there's the problem on the other end when you are writing these laws, because you are amending so many various parts of the law. Oh, okay, we need to, hey, look, we need to amend this part of the code, we need to amend this part of the code, we need to do this, we need to do that. And so actually, if you could see, but their problem is that they actually can't present it in a right way, because the law is already too complicated. So because the law is already too complicated and too expansive, what they do is they amend it to make even more complicated and even more expansive. And I
Well,
mean, this is the real problem with, right now. This is, and I would say this is the problem with all these presidential debates. This isn't discussed. We
well,
don't discuss how the system is so broken down.
yeah, they don't understand this stuff, on this
Right.
level at all. But another thing that occurs to me is that by making this a requirement, it would necessarily force the people who are amending these laws to actually understand what the damn thing is, before it gets rolled out, with these so-called unintended consequences, like, which we see all the time. Like, I'm convinced that, this whole foreign trust issue, this thing that's going on now, Treasury seeking comments, I do not believe for a second that any of these things that people are being penalized for filing 3520s on were ever intended to be caught up by this, or that they're foreign trusts at all, right? In fact, I put out a tweet last night saying, why do you think, a Canadian TFSA, who told you this was a foreign trust? Like, where did this idea come from? I mean, it's like such obvious bullshit. I mean, from the perspective of anybody like, where did this idea come from?
Well, John, I think we're figuring out a little bit of this. And by the way, if you're new to the channel, thanks so much for joining us today. We're going our reaction to the presidential debate, looking at things from a little bit of a different perspective, through this perspective of what we know. John, my host, my guest, the great John Richardson, going through the perspective of what we know, and really our perspective. This, what we're just talking about, is that we have these complicated laws. Tax laws. And this is really our specialty. We have these complicated tax laws, and then we have these complicated regulations and these complicated requirements. And then we also have things that make no sense. You'll have an entire tax industry tell you need to file this form. And then if you ask them for a little bit of support to say that, hey, can you just send me something from the IRS that says yes? And a classic example, we've gone over this again. And every time I see a tax professional repeat this, I ask them the simple question, and no one can respond. Here it is. There's currently a mythology out there, and I was once part of it, and I had a little hand in it. There's a mythology out there that any foreign mutual fund is something known as a passive foreign investment company. Okay, now the problem with that is when you do the PFIC, as it's called, the taxation on it is brutal, and it's incredibly complicated to prepare your return. So if you have a smaller mutual fund that's not making all that much money, you might want to get rid of it under this treatment, because the tax consequences are brutal. And so then the mythology was created, and oh boy, was this a mythology. And John did a wonderful job of breaking it down. There was a mythology created that, well, this was all passed in the 1986 law to punish foreign mutual fund holders and reward domestic. Now, I would say this, the law definitely was there to punish foreign interests, but John, what was going on in mutual funds in the time in 1986?
Well, certainly not enough, for this to be on the radar of any legislator. That is for sure. I mean, that's one of many examples. But what has happened in the whole tax professional industry, whatever you want to call it, is that frankly the stuff is so complicated that nobody can understand it, right? So what they do is they look to other people, and once a critical mass of, well, we don't know, but because we don't know, we might as well treat these things as foreign trust gets established, and then who's the victim here? It's all these, like, fascinating. And I've actually written a submission on this. I'll send it over to you, that was filed, on behalf of SEAT, yesterday, I guess. But one of the points that I make here is that there's absolutely nothing whatsoever in the intention of the law or even the existing regulations that could possibly lead anybody with half a brain who read the original stuff to possibly conclude that all these things that are, I mean, once it's a foreign trust, it's subject to massive penalties, right?
Yeah.
And these just simply are not. And what I think is going on is, a tyranny of the tax preparation industry.
Well, and it's completely true. And I think I'm getting some theories about how it's all created. Just publications, certain publications out there. I kind of see where things start, and really with the and I cannot find it anymore, which is weird. One of the places where I first read a very in-depth analysis and the greatest mythology of the PFIC regime as mutual funds was a law review article written by a law school professor. And I cannot find it. If any of our listeners can find this, I know it was a woman. And here's what she said. She said, I'm a law school professor and I ran into this big problem. Oh, what's this problem? Oh, I inherited a whole bunch of mutual funds. And I found out they were these PFICs. Now, at the time she wrote this, there was nothing out there.
Yeah, I remember the article.
Right? I cannot find it, and I cannot find it anymore.
University of Florida. She was a University of Florida law professor at one time. So maybe you want to do a search under.
All right, yeah. So, and I would love, you know what, and that would be a great one to do another podcast on. If I can find that one, because I think that was because I read that. It's like, oh wow,
write it down. It's called PFIC's Gone Wild. That was the title of the article. I just remembered it.
Oh my god, that's right. That's right. You're right. All right, let me see if I can pull that up
before I forget.
All right, PFIC's Gone Wild. All right. Let's see if I can.
Gone Wild. Monica, somebody I think was her name.
Let's see. All right, let's see if we can get this up here. As PFIC's Gone Wild.
Is it
there? It is. Yeah, whoa. Got it.
Oh,
right on. Here we go. Yeah. Just present it. So this is, and now I'll just, I know we're talking about the presidential debate here,
but this is link, please. I mean, you're right.
Yeah, I'll just get this up here. I'll put it in the super chat so people can check it out. But this was really one of the most, and I think, when you read this became what everyone believed. This was like, oh, okay, well, I guess she's going with this. It must be right. And here it is, PFIC's.
No, I think her, as I recall, I read that once. Yeah, there's the article.
Yeah.
What's her name?
Monica Giani.
Yeah. Okay. So this woman, really has written some great stuff. She also has written stuff on how the look-through rules work, etc. So send me the link over to that by email, would you, Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, and I'll put it in the super chat for everybody here.
But,
yep.
That's I mean, here's the point of the article here, right? Is that this is a person with the experience, the knowledge, and therefore I think the confidence to hold herself out and say, look, here's what's going on. The vast majority of people, these taxpayers have absolutely no confidence in their positions. I mean, it's just, somebody says something, but yeah, there it is. Great article. I think one of the most thought-provoking and one of the best, absolutely. And on the look-through rules also for.
Right. But now here's the thing is what she won't be able to find is anything from the IRS that says a mutual fund is a PFIC.
I think that is correct. And that is why, I mean, in my view, I think Americans abroad should prepare their returns based on, the information in publication 54.
Right.
Here's what she told me. Here's what I'll do, and leave it at that.
Right. And I kind of think of that, like one of the worst things that we have is the internet, because if the internet didn't exist, no one would be looking for these other, well, what do they mean by this? Well, what do they mean by this? And when you start looking for like, well, what do they mean by this? You're reading commentary. It's not legally binding. And so all this commentary is saying this, and it's not
even commentary. Okay. It's opinion handed down from tax preparer to tax preparer. Okay. Is all it is.
Yeah. Well, no, and then this is what I would say for those of you who didn't go to law school. Let me tell you what it is, what it's all about. It's not as hopeful and aspiring as you would be, as I found out. Really, what happens in law school is everyone's afraid. Everyone's afraid they're stupid. It's too complicated. They don't understand it. So it is the place where everyone is looking for the person with the right answer. And the right answer is the person who's the most confident.
I think there's
Trust me on that.
I think there's a great deal of truth to it, and I think the person is most proud of their general level of ignorance.
Wait. Say that again. What was that you said?
The person is most proud of their general level of ignorance. You know, I don't know, but I'm not bothered by the fact that I don't know. You know why? Because this stuff is so insanely ridiculous and complicated that no human being should be expected to understand this. Okay.
Right. Yeah, and if you're joining us, we're John and I are really discussing the disconnect between this political theater and then the reality on the ground. And we use our tax code as the demonstration.
The debate. We've got tons of PFIC stuff up there.
Yeah. So we'll move on. But so we're going to move on from this. But again, just showing how our point was this. Our point was that these laws are way too complicated. No representative is expected to read them or understand them. And then when they come out, that's not the final world, because people make up a whole bunch of things that aren't even the law. And then we're just using a few examples on that. So, all right, let's get back to the debate.
Let me just add here very briefly. I think our point is that the legislators don't know what they're signing into law, and nobody understands what the law is anyway, except the penalty. So going back to our last discussion, all of this is just one continuous evolution of very definite penalty for very indefinite conduct.
And thank you, John, for that. On Wednesday's podcast, that was another quote of the great John Richardson, and that's actually what kind of sparked this discussion. Is we were trying to come up with what is the United States of America? What is it really? When you think about it, you separate from the myths that they tell you and the myths that maybe you believe, but what is it really from a legal perspective of seeing problems come up and how the government operates, all around. And that's what we have. We have this wild, expansive code that no one can really manage in any way, but that's just the beginning of it. That's just the beginning of it. That's just the start, because it just grows out there in complexity outwards to these insane things with that conduct. And then we're talking about conduct, and there's been 20 felonies a day, or what was there's been books about people break the law every time. They don't even know it. And so what the United States of America is, it is certain penalties. We know those penalties exist. We know they can be penalized, but for what? Good luck, right? Good luck.
Well,
And they changed the definition on what they want. So we have a government that just sort of has a blank check to find you guilty for anything, and anyone else not guilty for anything. And that's what we have. So I think debating over who's going to control that, it's like, that's kind of what's funny. We're having a debate over who's going to control that. Like, hey, who's going to be the best person to lead this massively illegal criminal conspiracy?
Well, on that point, Anthony, when we look at the whole, we'll call this democracy in America, right? I think that this could be improved dramatically by a few norms. Okay, I don't think you're going to be able to change the Constitution, but norm number one would be that, and this is what things like Loper Bright and these the Supreme Court is really grappling with, is separating the executive branch from Congress. Okay, and I do not believe that any presidential candidate should be allowed to be affiliated with a political party at all. Because, then what happens is, you have all this stupidity of, did Biden actually say last night that he was going to try to change the law back to Roe versus Wade? I think he actually said that, right?
He mumbled many things like that.
Well,
yeah.
Something to that effect. Yeah. But that's not what the role of a president is. Okay. Right. Go back to more of an Eisenhower, time where, people understood that sure, it was nice to be president, but it was fundamentally a glorified administrative job. But look, once, okay, the executive branch becomes an extension of a political party, you've simply institutionalized perpetual warfare in the country, okay, with no trust etc. And another reason for this is the problem, the power of these judicial appointments, which if you're voting for a president, you got to understand that you are voting for a certain caliber, and I don't use the word caliber in a pejorative way necessarily, but you're voting for a certain caliber of lifetime judicial appointments forever. Right now, there are all kinds of people who take the position that, there was pressure, I think, at one point for Ruth Bader Ginsburg to retire before, while Trump, what's his name, Obama, was able to appoint a Democrat as successor, right? And this type of stuff should not be going on in any rule of law based kind of democracy. But this is where we are. Let's go back to the discussion last night. I mean, my view of it is that there were no winners. Okay, I think the country as a whole lost. I think that I don't think it was Biden's greatest performance. I mean, I think that's fair to say, but I've got to say that I don't find Trump, particularly better at all. When I look at Trump and Biden, and I came up with this thought actually this morning. And here's how I actually see this, okay? Biden, I do not think, he has his faults, but I don't see him as a massively, sort of corrupt individual.
Wait, who are you talking about?
Biden. I don't personally see him anyway.
What?
No, I don't see him as a,
What was that? All right, John, you did see that clip of him saying, hey, look, if you don't fire that prosecutor, you're not getting that loan, right? You did see that, right?
No, not really, but
okay, John. He's as dirty as they come, just so you know.
Let's say he's as dirty as he comes. He's as dirty as they come, but there's no way he's dirtier than the party he represents.
Okay,
that's what I'm trying to say.
Got it. Perfect. Okay. Perfectly said.
Biden, essentially makes the Democratic Party seem better than it is. Trump.
Yes, you got it. Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah. Trump, on the other hand, I think makes the Republican Party seem worse than it is. All right. And this is a very, very interesting dynamic, right?
Okay.
So essentially, one thing Biden does do, this is partly, who he was even 5 years ago, is I think that by focusing on Biden, I think that you mute a lot of what the Democratic Party has become. I mean, I agree with Tulsi Gabbard, who, by the way, I think should be Trump's choice for vice president. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
So, Biden, and by the way, also, I think that, maybe this is just sort of, my somewhat old school view of the world. But look, I think that, you got to respect Biden's 50 years, in government. All right. You got to respect that. And not everything he's done has been bad. Not everything he's done is good. But I think that he deserves some.
I'm holding my tongue, so I'll let you go.
I know you are. I think he deserves some acknowledgement for 50 years of public service. Okay. Now, that said, I don't think, my honest view is that I don't think either of those guys should be nominees. Okay. For different reasons. But what I do think is the Democrats are handing the election to Trump. They are literally.
Well, that's why I think there's something else going on here. This is just it's difficult to imagine. Really, it's I often ask myself, what a way to figure out what's going on is like, okay, well, again, if you were trying to make Joe Biden worse, what would you do differently? And other than having him pull down his pants, right? I mean, keeping it a plausible deniability. What would you do that's worse? And I'm looking at him like, I can't think of anything.
What would you do that's worse than Biden? Is that your question?
I said, if you were trying to give Joe Biden a worse night, what would he have? What would Joe Biden had to do to have a worse night than he did last night?
He could have fainted. He could have fallen.
Well, I'm about keeping it plausibly deniable, but keeping it within the realms of. Right.
I thought they were both terrible. Okay, I personally, although I think Trump was undeniably somewhat better. Okay, but I think that objectively, they were both very bad. And I think, I'll tell you what I would do if you want to hear. This is gonna shock you, but if I were running the Democratic Party, um, I don't think I've ever reached that particular
Low point. That's
moral
concentric
caliber.
cord. Yeah,
But
that's a control.
but
That's pretty low, dude.
but if
Oh,
I were okay, given the toxic nature of all of this, and I believe. See, I believe that Trump does not exist as an independent as a real candidate. Trump is simply the mechanism that the American people express their hostility for having been locked out of the political process by the Democratic Party. That's
there you
all.
go. There you go.
And he repeats this constantly. They're not coming after me. They're coming after you. Right? He reinforces this. But the thing is, I think there is some truth to this. So
Oh, totally true.
here would
It's
be my
totally true.
description for America in 2024. All right. And I'm actually, I know this would never come to pass, but I think that this would be a good thing for the country, a good thing for the world. Is I think the Democrats should ask Mitt Romney to replace Joe Biden, okay, a
Oh my
moderate
God.
Republican, to lead the party in the next election
Oh my God.
with some kind of a vice presidential candidate, maybe, to kind of balance it off a little bit, because I think that will restore the whole thing to some sense of, what the job of president is. I don't think that Romney is offensive to anybody.
Oh yeah, no, he's totally offensive.
You think I'm not? Well, not
Like,
not.
yeah, I think we're in different worlds. So it's great to get your perspective. We're in different, I think we're in different worlds. No, Mitt Romney is basically it's the same thing as Joe Biden, in my mind.
Oh God, no, not a
Their connections.
Mitt
Oh,
Romney is an effective governor. Private sector. He's made all kinds of money. He's
well, and this is what I would.
Republican. I think he'd be acceptable as I think that when he was
Well,
running,
I think, and I would agree. I agree with you in that I could see them replacing him, and that would be their winning move. That really
well,
would, and to me, it would be their winning move because in my mind, there is not much difference between what Mitt Romney would do and and what he would just do with less stuttering and
oh,
stupidity.
I'm not so sure about that. I'm not so sure.
Okay.
But here's the point. I see Mitt Romney as a man, and look at his voting record in the Senate, et cetera, who is fundamentally an independent candidate who happened to just latch on, to get sort of the Republican nomination. So, I think that could heal. I think it could heal a lot of political wounds.
I don't think that. I don't think that would help at all. But this is what I would say.
Happen. No,
This is what I would. This is what I would say on. I thought that Trump did incredibly well last night, but the overall format is so stupid.
You think
It's
Trump
like,
did well?
oh, I think he did incredibly well.
Why?
Incredibly well.
Why?
But here's where, but because look, the questions were asked a certain way, right? Everything was asked a certain way. That was not a fair debate, and Trump did incredibly well at it. But the entire format is stupid because as you go through because you get to this whole thing of Social Security. Okay, hey, those are great voters, and they're scared of losing their Social Security.
Right.
Okay, we have to
stop there, Anthony.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but on the word scared, this is a point that I think should be made. What struck me about the debate was how the whole thing, it's like it's all based on fear. People coming into the country, people doing this,
yeah,
that, abortion rights being taken away. It's all based on
die, yeah.
Surely to be an American must be something more than having to look to the left, look to the right, and all this fear. There's absolutely no whatsoever, from either candidate.
Right. It was just okay. There you go. Right. And okay, the format is so stupid because all it is, hey, this guy's going to do this. Hey, this guy's going to do this. No one's offering any solution. Just like this is what they're going to do. And when and this is where I just like, oh God, I just want to just turn it off when Trump starts talking about Social Security. Well, we're going to make sure we're going to do this and we're going to make sure to do that. It's like, look, no matter what, we have a problem because the problem with Social Security is that that people pay and it's that it's so inefficient both sides lose. When you pay money in, you lose, and when you get money out, you lose. Both sides lose because the program itself is stupid, and we should have moved to something much better like the Australian superannuations a long time ago. A long time ago, because there you could have talked about a solution. It's like, hey, you know what? Social Security is really a big problem, but you know, we our friends in Australia, you know what? They've been running their Australian superannuation for the last 30 years, and oh my good, it been working. Hey, I want to propose the same exact thing so we can make millionaires out of just regular Americans and give them the power. That would have been a positive discussion about an actually policy proposal that would have done something. That would have been right. I mean, that was good for everybody.
Yeah.
But we don't get that. We're just like, we're going to continue. Somehow we're going to fund this thing that's broken, and we're going to continue because I need those votes. I need those votes of those elderly. And look, I'll give you whatever it is. If we bankrupt the country to get your votes, that's what we'll do. Because the one thing I want to do is offer a solution. And that's where I said, you know what? Okay, this could be a lot better, but I don't know if this format, you could even discuss that. You don't have the time to develop these ideas because they are about substance.
Part of the problem, Anthony, is that, you know, these are sound bites. And, you know, given Biden's, a physical deterioration over the last 4 years, I mean, which is, I think, fairly obvious. Okay.
Right.
At least that, right. With leaving aside the question of any mental decline, there's been enough physical deterioration over the last 4 years to mean that he's not going to compare favorably, right, to anybody who's got any sort of level of energy, right? But, okay, the thing is that, a lot of the energy that came from Trump was negative energy. Okay, that's for sure. And I don't think that negative energy has any place, in a presidential debate at all. I mean, I think that the focus should be on a more kind of, positive vision. But let me ask you this question. I was watching it on NPR. I'm not sure where you were watching it, but after
Alex Jones.
Okay, but,
that's our difference. There we go. So you're getting a wide perspective. There you go.
Well, I was watching the debate there, right? But, after that, there was some discussion of, panic in the Democratic Party and, blah, blah, blah. And I thought that was, I thought it was an overreaction. I did not see Biden last night as, I think he was a little more tired than I've seen him perhaps at other times, but I didn't see him as dramatically different, right? From
I'd say so.
From him at this stage.
I agree. It was just Joe Biden for a longer time, basically. Right.
Well, I think it was Joe Biden for maybe a longer time in a somewhat different situation, where he wasn't speaking to, I don't know, a bunch of reporters or something. But look, let's be clear. One, neither of these guys has any growth potential. Okay. So these types of things are not about increasing support for anybody. Two, therefore, the objective of these things is to sort of minimize damage control. I do agree that there were plenty of people out there who, would say, well, this is evidence that the Democrats should have a different candidate. But we knew that anyway. I mean, we knew that anyway. We knew that 4 years ago. We knew that anyway. So what else is new? But what we also know is that for whatever reason, because the Democrats are about the Democrats and not about the country, they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I think that this whole thing should be seen as a fraud on the American people, orchestrated by the Democratic Party. Largely that, where I think they're handing the election. I mean, a year ago, I did not think that Trump could be reelected. Okay. But now I am not so sure, because I think that the decision to prosecute him criminally has, what it really has done, all right, is demonstrated that rule of law doesn't operate in America because this is such a selective prosecution. All right. So, I mean, I think it's done that. And I think what that does is strengthens Trump's claim. They're not coming after me. they're coming after you.
And
It's
that's the
time
part,
in
right?
their way.
And I think that's the sales pitch that is sort of
You
irrefutable.
have the
But
Democrats.
yeah,
I have not seen anything from the Democrats that gives any reason to vote for Biden other than the Trump to keep Trump from being elected.
that is solely it. And that's what I think when we talk about the tribalism. Hey, did Biden win? Yeah, he won. Well, why is that? Because he's going to defeat Trump. And it's like, okay, but what is Biden going to do? What has he done? What has he done to help? Well, it doesn't. Well, he's just kept Trump out, and so it's that fear and agitation. That fear and agitation of the other side that keeps you on this ideological plantation that we are on, where there's just right and left, and as they both, but in fact they work in together in unison to strip power away from us continually and forever with directly. They strip power away from us directly and then indirectly, and it's constant. And this is sort of the thing, as we're talking about this debate, this humiliation for America, well deserved humiliation for America. This is the America that believes it should be exporting these values around the world. We believe we should be exporting Joe Biden or whoever's controlling it, whatever the entity is that Joe Biden just happens to be the face of. We actually think the world needs more of this.
It's but go back to what I said, about the 80s when Brezhnev died. It's exactly the same thing, but perhaps worse. So then they have Chernyenko, and then Andropov, I think, is that right? Okay, etc. They both died. They're both in their mid 60s, considered to be old men, etc. At the time. Then eventually, you land with Gorbachev. But I mean, I have a lot of trouble seeing the America today is any different from that at all. I mean, surely, Anthony, surely there are rational, reasonable, effective people in their 50s out there, who understand both the last century and this century, who would be better candidates for president. Why do those candidates not show up?
Right.
All right, as the party's representatives.
That's the point. Right.
Because the Democratic Party is not about serving and this is, I think,
not about the future.
Fact, it is not about just serving the American people.
No.
It's about serving and perpetuating the dominance of the Democratic Party. And that is the reason why. Look, I'm not, if anything, I'm an independent. I'm just an objective observer of this, I think.
Wow.
But this is why I think the worst thing that anybody could do is vote for the Democrats on the next election, because this is not about Trump or Biden. This is about whether individual voters get to have a say and play a role in the political process. That's what this is really about.
Right. And I think where I'm worried about Trump, where I'm going to be voting for him because they can't stand him so much. So I'm like, all right, well, just by that, I'm going to vote for him. The powers can't stand him. So I'm like, okay, look, you're basically selling him. I actually don't like him that much, but you sold him to me because you hate him so much.
Well, I don't think that. Yeah, I'm not. Look, I don't. I'm just not I'm not like a Trump Republican.
I'm a Trump, but I'm not Republican, because what I look as the Republicans is they're just a lip service that will be the controlled opposition to the Democrats. But when it comes down to it, they always find that bipartisan agreement to make sure they give the shaft to the American people, so that the Republicans give cover to the whole scheme for the most part, with the exception of Trump. Because your fellow Republicans can't stand him. Mitt Romney can't stand Donald Trump. He doesn't like him because Mitt Romney represents the establishment, whereas Trump is representing more of the people. And that's the biggest problem that we have. We truly have, regardless of Trump's faults. And because I do think he believes in far too much of the American empire, way too much. For all of those faults, he at least is trying to give the people some sort of say in what this country should be. Some sort of say, whereas the Democrats are like, no, this is what it should be, and you're stupid for not believing it, and you're going to die if you don't believe it. And then the Republicans say, hey, look how bad these Democrats are. Vote for us. Well, we'll make sure they get their way, though.
You're part of the DNC High Command. I mean, I think it's clear that the Democrats have seen better days. Okay, I think that's pretty clear.
Well, yeah.
What would you advise? I told you what I think they ought to do. What do you think they ought to do?
Oh boy. Uh, uh, resign in disgrace, and
Well, remember,
um,
they have no shame, right?
right.
They have no-
So what I would advise them to do is seriously repent to God, because you're going to hell. You're
Well,
going to be dead. You're going to be dead to
they,
death.
Anthony,
That's
they presume they're going to hell. Okay,
well, they presume it's going to be okay in hell. Oh no, but
what
uh,
about this? What about this election? Okay, so
oh
there's a
boy.
real issue here. I was
What I
at
would here's my suggestion. You put RFK Jr. on the ballot. That's your best bet. Say get rid of. Hey, look, he tried to get on there. You guys wouldn't let him, and maybe that's what the whole setup was. Is just get all look. You got to get somebody who actually and RFK has some faults, but he actually has some. He has independent thinking. He has independent thinking
I
that
could
is.
not be worse than Trump or Biden. Okay,
So I would say that would be what that would be my recommendation to the Democrats is like, stop. You know what? You got time, and he would take it. And you would and give it to RFK, who he's been all over the place, which like, okay, that's good. But and one of the things that I thought about, John, it was really, and I think I could explain this fairly quickly, but I've seen an institutional destruction of the IRS. And this is what I mean. When I started this back in 2007, 2008 with my dad, the IRS had some real competent people there. And what I saw happen was they all kind of felt they retired out, and the younger people just didn't have the same sort of energy, excitement. And I mean that in a good way, because these guys would often help me find solutions. They would often help me find solutions to complicated things like, hey, how are we going to close this out? That's what they would do. And they'd be wonderful to deal with. They went away. Those people are gone. They're retired. They're not getting back there. And I just thought it was like, man, what really happened there? What happened there? And then I realized something. And it was my dad always was telling me about this, because this is something that came well before me. Kennedy. I was born in 71. Okay. So everything of Kennedy was in the past. My dad would always, say these things about Kennedy. I'm like, I don't get it. It's just whatever. He's just some politician. My dad, but now I understand it, because my dad was one of those people who believed it. My dad was one of those people who believed, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And so my dad heard that, and that inspired him. My dad was an Ivy League grad. He could have done anything. He decided, it's like, what, a career in public service is the greatest thing I can do. And here's the thing. He wasn't alone. He wasn't alone. So he's working with all these people who are really dedicated, hardworking people in government service, making it work. So it's sort of this ironic thing that Kennedy was all about liberty and the people, yet his inspirational words went to go to empower the government to do these things. And so now what has happened is that this government has grown monstrously, and it's kind of held together with a bailing wire of these highly dedicated, highly competent people that are keeping this monstrosity together. But now what's happened is those people have retired. And so this incredible federal government that's bloomed is no longer constrained. It's no longer constrained by people with wisdom. It's just here, it's going, and now people are falling out of it. And so that's what I've actually seen here. That's my theory on sort of the rise and fall of the US government, that it rose because of these inspirational values that, as we talk about positivity, my dad's like, you got to understand, Kennedy was the most positive thing. He's given us this future that we're like, oh yeah, we want it. It's like, well, Dad, what happened? He's like, this ain't it. This is not what we were dreaming of back in the day. We really thought we were going to have this incredible future. And so with the death of JFK, there was that death. It was really, I think it really ended the death of the future of America. It really, or I'm sorry, the future of the government. It also, while the government was able to blossom, grow, that was also signaling its death.
You mean as a positive thing? As
a positive thing. I mean, that was one of the most positive things. Now, I don't think he said that in a debate. It wasn't said in a debate. But that was a positive thing that, unfortunately, I guess if Kennedy still was in power, it would have been a good thing that all these people, all these qualified people I mean, incredibly qualified people going in the government, and boy, do I miss them. That is, so that is the thing that we are missing. And that is what is explaining so much of what we have, is that this entire government creep, and I mean creep is a good word, right? This in government creeping is all sort of started because of some aspirational words. Without those aspirational words, we would not be in the disaster. Well, maybe we would, but I don't think we'd be here as quickly.
Well, when Clinton was campaigning for president, I guess '92, in one of his speeches, he said, "Where there's no," what was he quoting? Was that Solomon? "Where there is no people, where there is no vision, the people perish." And that was a very effective idea. But fundamentally, I do think it's important. I think it's absolutely essential for sustainable democracies that governments encompass or embody some kind of positive vision for the future. And if we look at what's going on all around the world, July 4th, there's an election in the UK. It's incredibly negative. Canada, no elections soon, but very negative. France has an election, I guess next week. And what this is really about, I think, is the inability of modern governments to stand for something positive. But let me answer directly.
And here's why: because positivity requires creativity, and evil isn't creative. Evil can only take things that are creative and take them for their own purposes. Evil has no creativity. And I believe our government has been totally taken over by evil. So evil can only steal, only can lie. It cannot create. And positivity it requires some creation in your mind. You have to have an idea for a better future. You have to be able to communicate that idea to other people. And that's something that evil people have no idea. They can emulate. Okay, or that's how you be positive. Okay, let me try to be positive. Be positive. They can't do it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's.
So Anthony, what would you advise? Let's say you had an audience with the head of the DNC High Command today. What would you suggest they do? Do they continue with Biden? Do they replace Biden? Do they simply say, we've decided that we'd rather just let Trump be president and not have an election?
Okay.
What would you advise them to do?
Okay, I'm gonna answer this question not as their spiritual advisor, but as a political consultant. That is, if they hired me for political consultant, what would my answer would be? My answer would be, you got to put RFK. You got to put RFK in there to save your own selves.
All right,
you're going to destroy you're basically going to be up. Yeah.
Pause there for a minute. Remember what I was saying about I think, importance of separating these political parties from the executive branch.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, John. Now that I think about it,
wouldn't installing RFK, of course, they would never do this. RFK Jr. Wouldn't that facilitate that objective because he sees himself as an independent?
Yes, that would.
Yeah, but of course they won't.
No.
But I mean, so they're not going to do that. Now, let's say that they then decide they're going to. I mean, I was at an event couple nights ago, and somebody was suggesting they heard that, well, the idea was to replace Biden with Hillary Clinton. What were your thoughts on that?
I would love to see Hillary Clinton lose again. That was one of the greatest nights of all time.
But
that was
Just
incredible.
perpetuate,
of course,
the truth that the Democrats are just sad about the Democrats.
Yeah. It is.
I think. What about? I remain committed to the view that I think you and Keith ought to be running for president. Right? What about the Democrats simply replace Biden with Anthony Parent?
Yeah, there we go. Right. I don't know. Right. Well, then now you're bringing up one of the greatest points is like the selection, and here we have a selection that we're talking out in the open. that there's going to be no democratic process that creates the Democratic presidential nominee.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? They're like, you know what? We're here. Let's get practical, guys. Let's get practical. This voting nonsense is getting in the way of us getting the optimal candidate. It's really getting in the way of this. And I mean, this is, your point earlier is like, look, first of all, I want to just say, I am not an ageist whatsoever. My dad is 83 years old, and he's welcome to come back to work any day. Any day, Dad, you're welcome to come back. Love to have you. But at the same point, the age is still a reality, and it's not necessarily, it's a bad thing to be 83. Things change, though, as my dad says, things do change. But I wouldn't necessarily rule it out. But the problem is that you're right, because a 50-year-old would be, someone who's a 50-year-old would be a better 50, 60 years old would be a better age. It's just the truth. It's just the truth. And that, but yet we have a political system that, because the Democrats are not about the future. They're not about the future so much. They have everyone in leadership is so geriatric, and they wouldn't even get rid of Dianne Feinstein. I mean, come on. That's how much they can't stand the next generation. That's the truth. They will not.
Democrats are about the Democrats. They're not about the country. Okay?
They're not about future Democrats.
They're
not even right. They're not about.
They're bringing in. I mean, they manage to, create an enemy, and I'm a Tulsi Gabbard fan. I think that she. I mean, it's not to say I agree with everything she says, but I think that she, is the candidate, for the next generation, or at least one of them. And rather than
then I would say she would be my one to put in then. Well, I would say RFK, you have a better chance of winning. Tulsi would do solid. And Tulsi would be solid. But again, neither one of them being democratically elected by this point, though, as they're just being appointed.
That is not a possibility, Anthony. I mean, I think we agree that the only role of the individual American is to vote like a trained seal. Okay, that's it. And this is part of the problem here. Okay, that you've got a party that just exists to feed and nurture the party. I mean, it's like, well, it's Hillary's turn to run. Let's get behind her. Well, Joe's been around a number of years. This sort of stuff, right? And let's keep Bernie out. Again, I'm not saying I'm promoting Bernie, but let's keep him out.
Okay? Yeah, right.
Politics.
I guess this is sort of what I'm thinking of when you mentioned elections and sort of the whole voting process. To me, the entire voting process is, are you familiar with the term beard? Like a beard, but like, if you are a gay gentleman and you don't want people to know that, you might marry a woman, and that woman is known as your beard. She's supposed to distract the fact that you're homosexual. Okay. So what I would say is voting is the beard, to the tyranny that is the US government. It's there to make it appear as if there's some sort of political recourse, to make it appear as there's some sort of political accountability, because, the Supreme Court can get up there and say, well, hey, look, this is an issue for the political process. The political process that's completely unconstitutional. Well, hey, that's decided by the political. Well, we ought to stay out of political issues here. Oh, of course you would, because they always rule in favor of the government, right? Of course you would. So that's kind of what we have here. These votings, and voting is just, again, and especially for Congress, voting for anyone in Congress is a complete waste of time. It's a complete waste of time to vote for anyone in Congress, because no one reads anything there. It doesn't matter. You are not a constituency to your congressperson. It doesn't matter who you are. Now they'll give you lip service to make it. Of course they will, but you are not their constituency. So that is, an even greater joke, I would say, who you're voting for Congress and Senate, right? I mean,
well, okay. So, let me just ask you, okay. Now I asked you what you would advise them. What do you think the Democrats will do here?
I'll put Gavin Newsom in.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, that's your only choice.
Well, then that's really going to come down to a choice between, a high tax, high spending liberal and
a high tax, high spending, whatever, right?
You
Yeah.
know, and that's probably helpful to Trump too. That's probably helpful.
I think it's just it gives a more, it's what
Well,
I think.
what
I
it
mean,
does is it reinforces that the Democratic Party is the clear enemy of the average American, right?
right. Yeah, Gavin Newsom hasn't been doing a lot of good for California there, and it's not. He's got a record of failure, of failure, of failure. Everything he does is failing. The only thing what he has going for him is he's not Joe Biden. That's and by the way, that's a huge political advantage.
Do you think that Joe Biden would voluntarily pack it in? I'm out of energy. I don't
Yeah,
want.
he's got. I think it will be something like that, some sort of cover story. I mean, I don't even know how much of this
You
is
think he would
real.
honestly pack it in? Of course, there's going to be if there were, there'd be a cover.
Well, I mean, I don't even know if he wanted to run for president. I don't even know. I don't even this there's so much about this that just seems implausible. It just doesn't seem real. It doesn't seem organic. So much of this, I just, I wouldn't be surprised with anything at this point. I wouldn't be surprised by anything. It doesn't see, there's so many weird things going on. It's providing a lot of, and I think a lot of it, is entertainment, not positive entertainment, but what it is doing. And this is the best thing. I mean, this is why I'm saying it's the greatest presidential debate of all time, because it's exposing how lousy the American empire is, how lousy our media is in bed with it, how brainwashed we are to think we actually have a choice in matter. It's revealing that there are no clues to this federal government. This federal government is Joe Biden. That's what the leader of this federal government is Joe Biden. What greater indictment is there out there? What could there be? And well, here's what's great. We're going to find out because there's just more coming down the road. I think we're just going to see even crazier and crazier.
Okay,
things.
last question for you.
Yeah.
Trump's VP choice. Trump's vice presidential choice.
I don't know. I'm going to whoever it is, I'm going to be disappointed. That's kind of where I'm at. I would say this. Here's my quote. No one from the Ivy League. No one with a Republican next to their name. Okay. Those would be my two ideals. I really would prefer not a Republican, never a senator, no one, not a senator, not a congressman. Yet I would really prefer not a Republican, somebody who see things a little bit different. Elon Musk. There you go. He would be great. That's who I would hope to see.
No, that will be perceived as another sort of assault on the average American. Well, it'll be interesting.
I think so. And now, and I do want to, and we do want to, and I do want to tease our next week, what we're going to be covering next week for those of us. John, thank you so much for, by the way, thank you so much for doing this with me. It's a blast. You know what? And you and I, we really do have different perspectives. And I think what's nice is we have enough of an open mind to see. And I think where John and I agree, and we agree a lot, even though we do come from very different perspectives. We do agree a lot because we do have we see reality, we recognize reality. We see how things actually operate. And that's what we're trying to do, is explain really this divide that has led to these absurd results. And we do talk about tax content a little bit more. And next week we'll be covering something because one thing I do want to cover, John, is what you did tweet last night, that there is no authority to claim that you could assess foreign trust reporting penalties when someone has a foreign pension. Because someone has a foreign pension, that's not a trust, it's a pension. It doesn't meet the definition of a trust, yet somehow we have this entire belief system and entire
I'll send you I don't know if I have or if I think I haven't, but I'll send you the submission, the seat submission
okay.
comment thing, which we can discuss. Actually, I'd be interested to have people's thoughts on it. But
right on. All right. Well, and by the way, this is the first time John and I really went off of mostly tax content, but talked about larger things. So let us know what you think about this format. If you found it interesting, I said we got some pretty good views, so hey, not too bad. But any comments how we could improve it? Really, we do like bringing our keen analysis that you cannot get anywhere else to the discourse, because we think it is very missed.
Not necessarily analysis, Anthony. Perspective.
Perspective. Well,
but let's not glorify it that much, okay?
Things that, another way to think about what's going on. So, and I think just to give some, and I would say this, let's give some positivity to this. I do actually imagine I do actually imagine a world where, people actually have political power, where the law isn't just the tool of the powerful to retain more powerful, but the law actually is just. We can't imagine that world. We can imagine that world, and let's continue to do that. Yeah, right on. Thank God for that. We want to do that. We want to continue to thank God and be positive, be happy warriors. Whatever's going on here, I think it's a little bit bigger than just Republican versus Democrat. I think big things are going on. Stay positive and stay informed. John, thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe because we are going to go live next week with a few topics. And if you have ideas, let me just share you my email. As well. Oh, by the way, and let me give a plug to John for his great work. John helps a lot of people renounce their citizenship because the U.S. tax system is the most onerous in the world, the craziest, most insane, awful thing ever. And unfortunately, if it is something you're considering of renouncing, what's the best time to renounce, John?
When you have an appointment.
When you have an appointment, how to get an appointment, go to John Richardson right here, citizenship solutions at proton.mail.com. Especially if you have a complicated one. Oh boy, this is where you need his firepower. You can really help out. He's just someone who really cares, and he just shares his talents so much. He's so generous with all of us. Thank you, the great John Richardson. Now let me just give a little plug for myself here. I'm Anthony Parent. I just joined, my firm just merged with the Vos and Partners. Very exciting. We have more of an international base. We have Swiss connections. We're in Hawaii as well now. Very excited. Keeping IRS Medics, same place. You can still get me there. So if you do have an international issue that you have a little problems with, maybe a larger excise tax, some other foreign trust issues, maybe a streamlined disclosure, or maybe you just need some returns filed, hey, reach out to us here, irsmedic.com/offshore. You can get us there. And also, I want to share my email with any of you. So if you have any great topics, if you think you want to be a guest, any suggestions for the show, I really appreciate it. We don't have the large numbers, but I got to tell you, if you are watching this, I know you're an exceptional person. Only exceptional, intelligent people get this level of content. So this is why I'm fine sending out my email, because I only get great emails because you guys are so wonderful. So I appreciate that. You can send it. This is my actual email. Anything, please reach out to me. So with that, this is Anthony Parent of IRS Medic for John Richardson. Thanks for watching.